Welcome to Talking Money. It's episode 4. Hannah, welcome back. How is life treating you now in Tier 3, London?
Well, it hasn't made a huge difference, I have to be honest. I think tier 2 is not exactly a fun tier. There are so many kind of loopholes that you have to jump through if you want to see friends, and you can't even go and have a takeaway pint. Wet pubs aren't even allowed to do that at the moment. So it's pretty restrictive as it is. So I'm fine with it. I quite like hibernating when the weather gets this bad and horrible. So
Yeah.
I can live with it. But I do feel sorry for the businesses that are going to take a real hit in the run up to Christmas.
Oh yeah, especially all these pubs and restaurants that have stocked up loads of food ahead of Christmas trade and being told with a day's notice, that's it. I imagine there's going to be a bit of a blow. We're recording on Tuesday afternoon. I imagine a bit of a blowout in town tonight with people, or you think people would stay at home and be sensible?
I don't know, because like I said, it's difficult to have fun at the best of times. So I think there will be certain people that go out and, go and have a massive, massive good time if they can. But I think as well, the fact that it's Tuesday probably means that people really won't bother.
No, no, absolutely. We've got 3 things to talk about this week. The first 2 are actually sort of Brexit themed, Brexit related. The second one's certainly about Brexit, but the first one has got a Brexit flavour to it. And this is what young Mr. Nigel Farage has been up to. And I know you and I have both been sort of keeping tabs on him, making sure he doesn't get up to anything too naughty recently. And we've been watching with, I guess, sort of morbid fascination, this investment newsletter he's been pushing out called Fortune and Freedom. Tell our listeners, tell our viewers about the video that you and I both had the pleasure of watching yesterday afternoon.
Well, yes. So yesterday was for a while they'd been sort of hinting that there was this new big thing to come, and tune in on 2 p.m. on Monday, which I thought was a really weird time because people have to go to work, but it's fine. It went ahead. And this is something called the Great Wealth Revolution. Now, what this is supposedly is kind of almost a blueprint for you to be financially better off. Possibly. They do kind of put caveats and whatnot in there because, there's obviously no guarantees when it comes to investment. And it's approved by this guy called Rob Marstrand, who there's not a huge amount of information about him online, but he is an editor and a writer at South Bank Investment Services Management Research, which is actually the thing that publishes Nigel Farage's Fortune and Freedom newsletter. So there's a very tangible link between the two of them. There's it goes into specific kind of detail that it wants people to look at and understand. REITs, so kind of consumer property funds, and the best of British post Brexit stock, and gold. And there is guides issued for people that want to learn about any of the following things that I just said. And actually you could pick this apart, and I know you've done a really fantastic video on this, but there's so many layers of concern to this. But on just a very, very basic one, the thing that strikes me as slightly worrying is if there was a genuine blueprint that was like, okay, if you do this, you're going to have some cracking returns, we would all be doing it. This would already exist. This is not it feels almost like he's sort of telling people, his people that think ideologically the same way that he does. I think that's very much who this is targeted at. I've got the answer that should make you some money.
Yeah.
And I don't buy that. And secondly, it's all very much about this guy Rob, who it's marketed that he's made some really good calls and that he's done very well for himself. But ultimately, I don't think you should be putting 100% of your trust in any one individual. And we've seen this as a very, very recent, very kind of obvious example is Neil Woodford. For a long time, he was the golden boy. And look where we are now. His fund was shuttered. His company, I think, has been shut down or sold to other people. His investors have either lost money or they're still trapped in this fund. And that, people can make good calls, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to time the market and always tell you what's best.
Yeah, I mean, it's a golden rule of this, isn't it? Past performance is not necessarily a guide to future returns. And whilst that warning message did appear throughout the video presentation from Nigel Farage yesterday, he was selling performance. There were charts in there saying, look, this chap Rob went in at this level, came out 67% later, came out 100% later, and he was picking the winners. I think one of the things that really concerned me about that presentation was how selective they were over the stories they were telling, and yeah, showing these fantastic periods of returns, showing the good, the right, the winning investment calls, not talking about obviously the losers, because no one's perfect when it comes to this stuff. Yeah, you can be one of the best investors in the world and you will still make bad judgments, you'll still make the wrong decisions, you'll lose money. And also there was very little talk. I could rant for hours about this because I think it was incredibly dangerous for many investors to get involved in, but there was no talk about the level of risk being taken at any point in this. So there was lots of talk about the returns and the performance, but very little talk about what that meant if it had gone the other way. There were testimonials in that video with people saying, I've made X% over the last 18 months, etc. But they were speculative, they were gambling, they could have easily lost money going in the other direction. But the sort of punchline, I guess, from this whole presentation yesterday was, pay us £199 a year and we'll give you access to this subscription service and stock tips. And should anyone be spent, I don't want to put you on the spot, Hannah, but should anyone be spending £199 a year to get stock tips from Nigel Farage and his buddies?
No, I mean, this is one of the things. It's that's not cheap, you know. That's still £200. That's, you know, kind of, well, possibly being thrown into the abyss. It depends, I suppose, on your opinion. But there is so much fantastic information that exists that is free online, and that anybody can find out. I know finance can feel quite opaque, especially if you haven't worked in finance, you've not written about finance, you don't know the first thing about funds. I remember when I first started doing this, I wouldn't have had a clue how to invest in a fund. I literally would not have known. But if you look hard enough, you will be able to find guides that are written in a way that's for people. I actually think the way some of Farage's reports are worded are incredibly condescending, apart from anything else. I absolutely wouldn't pay £200 for this. I think there's probably better information, more even information out there, and £200 is very, very steep for that.
And information that's being presented without an agenda. And I think that was what worries me the most about this proposition, this Britain's great wealth revival, the fact that Farage is pitching it as, you said it earlier, sort of he's trying to align this investment philosophy and this blueprint with the sort of supporters who believe everything he has to say about Brexit, about politics, etc. And there was lots of sort of them and us language, making it sound like this is some great conspiracy that the financial elite are trying to keep the little man down.
Yes, this is that. There are two major things as well that I have a big problem with this. One, you can be in charge of your money. Literally anybody can do whatever they want with their own money. There's actually nobody really stopping you. I mean, there are certain rules around when you can and can't take maybe investments out of certain things that you've put it in because you have either chosen to put it there or because there are certain rules like pensions. I'm thinking things like that, that you can't just withdraw a load of your pension. But you can do what you want with your money. It's a total conspiracy to act as though somehow the financial institutions are forcing you to do X, Y, Z with your money. That's not true. You can literally spend it how you want and put it into whatever you want, as long as you're happy with how you do that. And secondly, the other thing that really, really winds me up about this, on the website, there's a load of, this is their Fortune and Freedom's website. There's a load of reports that you can find, and some relate to things like cryptocurrency, others talk about gold. But also what you can find on there is really basic budgeting advice. And I'm talking incredibly basic, like calculating how you can save some money each month by looking at the money that's coming into your account versus what you're spending it on, and suggestions to cut back on things like subscriptions, for instance, if
newsletter subscriptions, maybe.
The irony. But the point is, by the fact that that exists on his website suggests that these two audiences don't align. There's no, it's like he's never taken the time to sort of get an audience of people together that maybe have a bit of investment experience, have got X amount of
Mm,
money, are kind of, they're slightly better placed to take these risks. Instead, it's sort of this kind of catch-all net that's, never invested before, fine.
yeah.
Pro, fine.
Yeah.
As long as you believe in me and you back Brexit Britain, you should invest in this.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
the range
madness.
of investor experiences to go from, as you say, very basic budgeting tips through to cryptocurrency or commodity trading is just so vast that these should not be the same audiences. These are different audiences, different selections of people. We could rant about this all day, and I don't think that would be healthy for either of us. So let's move on, but continue talking about Brexit. And when we agreed to talk about this, we said you and I wouldn't get into a fight, because I know we're from very different sides of the Brexit debate, as it were. But we're recording Tuesday afternoon. There is still no trade deal, and it's winding lots of people up, I know. They are continuing to talk and through right up until the last minute, so through until New Year's Eve, which, as things stand, looks like will be the case. But what will be the impact? I know Johnson keeps calling this an Australia-style trade deal, which basically means no trade deal. What would be the impact for us, say come 1st of January, if there is no trade deal?
Well, that's actually the first point I was about to make, because I think a lot of people don't realize that this Australian style deal is practically no deal in everything but name only. Australia do not have a free trade agreement with the EU. They have been trying to negotiate a free trade agreement with the EU since 2018. They have kind of, the best way I suppose it's almost like international cooperation, and which I think makes sense from a Western liberal democratic point of view. I imagine that a lot of nations kind of have the same thing. In terms of the immediate effects of, then let's just call it a no deal Brexit, because it looks like that's really what we're heading for. The biggest thing I think that's going to affect all of us from day one will be the existence of tariffs.
Yeah.
Now, I imagine a lot of your audience knows this by now, because we've heard so much about tariffs in the last 4 years. But right now, being a member of the European Union, or, we're actually not anymore, are we? But still being in this transition period, there are currently no tariffs between goods either leaving the UK or coming into the UK from elsewhere. Now, assuming we crash out without a deal, that means that tariffs will be applied. Now, different tariffs are applied to different goods. I think cars, I think it's 10%. There are certain foods, your meats, cheeses, milks. So if you're vegan, you'll be fine. You're going to have a great Brexit. But for everyone else, we are looking at literally going to your supermarket. Inevitably, those costs will be passed on to the consumer, meaning that your food basket will be that much more expensive. And every person buys different things, so I have no idea how that will affect individuals. But basically speaking, that will be a big one from day dot. The other as well is that if we head out on WTO conditions, World Trade Organization conditions, as of the 1st of January, we will actually be considered a third nation to the EU, which is a very odd position for us to find ourselves in, because that now means, because of the coronavirus, a lot of third nation individuals are actually not allowed into the EU at the moment.
Right.
And it's to stop the spread of COVID. So we could find ourselves actually not even allowed to enter the European Union from 1st of January, which is a really weird situation to find ourselves in, given that we've been a part of it for so long. So if you have European holidays booked, that's not an ideal
It's possibly
situation.
a bit up in the air, isn't it? And as well as the tariffs, of course, there's this issue around border checks. And part of the issue is not just sort of price inflation in the short term because of tariffs being imposed, but we could see delays in terms of the supply chain, so queues at Dover, etc. So that's something to be aware of. I mean, it looks likely, and Johnson today sort of briefing the cabinet, apparently saying talks are most likely to end without an agreement. But the UK wants a post-Brexit trade deal with the EU, but not at any cost. So it's a bit of mixed messaging going on, as I think we've become used to from the government in recent years. But if we do crash out without that trade deal on the 1st of January, certainly tariffs, short-term supply chain disruption. The British Retail Consortium saying this week, don't panic buy. And I think telling the British consumer not to panic buy, not to stockpile, is just, you know, red rag to a bull, isn't it? I mean, this is, they're going to go out there and they're going to stockpile, but
everyone's going to stockpile. It's I've seen a few reports in various news organizations that already supermarkets have done some stockpiling because they're a little bit concerned that, you know, the disruption of food coming in and whatnot. And I think medicine is another one to pay attention to. I think for things like the vaccine, as in the coronavirus vaccine, I'm pretty sure we've already got some kind of agreement in place, so that won't be disrupted. I think I remember reading that, which obviously, thank God. But for other medicines, we're having to stockpile them, things like insulin that might be affected by coming over the border. It's an awful lot of work, it turns out, to leave an institution like the EU.
I can imagine,
not easy.
yeah. And of course, for sake of balance as well, worth remembering that this is going to hurt the European Union probably almost as much as it hurts the UK. So these tariffs work both ways, these border checks work both ways. The UK is a big market for the European Union, and certain countries within the EU, particularly those with the sort of closest geographical relationship to the UK, very much rely on it. Agriculture, fisheries, and small, medium-sized enterprises in particular are likely to need support from the European Union if there's a no-deal Brexit. You know, they're going to face some real difficulties trading. So it's a lose-lose for both sides if a deal is not done. It'll be interesting to see. I still think there's a greater than 50% chance a deal will be done in time of some description. It may not come into force on the 1st of Jan. We might have a bit of a period where there is no deal in place because it takes a while to ratify on both sides and do the legal stuff. But I think, yeah, it would be foolish. That's not necessarily a reason for not doing it, but it'd be foolish for both sides not to come to some sort of arrangement, even if they don't get everything they possibly want, including, you know, complete control of British fishery waters and that nonsense that's going on there. But we'll see. We'll see.
We will. That's the thing. I agree. I mean, it makes sense for everybody to get a deal, and I'm not as optimistic as you. I actually think that probably we won't have a deal. And just looking at other countries and how challenging it has been for them to organize free trade deals with the EU. I mean, you would have thought it would be easier for us, given that we've had years and years and years and our standards are aligned and things like that. But it's proving incredibly difficult. And the hit to GDP as well. I mean, we've already had obviously a very bad year for GDP because of coronavirus, and that's only going to make it considerably worse. And the EU are by far our biggest trading partner, so it doesn't look good. Let's put it that way. And it's especially frustrating, I think, after being told so many times during even the referendum campaign. You know, we're not talking about coming out of the customs union. We're not talking about leaving the single market. We're just talking about moving away from that. So to now end up at a point where we're looking at the hardest of Brexits that we could have possibly gone for, when in reality, 48% of people didn't even want to leave the bloc, let alone, you know, sever ties and chuck a bomb inside as they left. It doesn't feel like a very fair or very sensible outcome.
No, I think you and I can both agree on that. Third topic then, let's move away from Brexit. There's a report out from the Commission on Workers and Technology, and they're warning about a double whammy to jobs in some sectors. So the risk of furlough and redundancy in the first instance because of COVID, but also this threat of automation replacing jobs. So this rise in technology. Now, you and I, we've exchanged messages on this. We're both, I think, not worried, but we're mindful that our professions could actually be ones, as well as these sectors they're talking about, retail and hospitality. The journalism, financial planning, wealth management could be sectors actually quite hard hit by automation in the future. So do you think the robots are coming for your job?
Maybe one day, but not quite yet. I think the immediate people, as you've said, that are kind of disproportionately impacted this, and coronavirus has only served to speed it up. As we've talked about, how coronavirus seems to be speeding up almost everything inevitable. Coronavirus has just sort of given it a nice push along. But people that are going to be first affected are those that, yes, are low skilled, low pay, which sounds like a really horrible way to put that, by the way. I'm quoting somebody from Oxford University on that one. And this particular BBC article said 61% of furloughed jobs were in sectors that are a very high risk of automation, which absolutely is your retail, hospitality, all that sort of stuff. Now, a report from PwC that I found on this essentially, and I think it was written before coronavirus, so with that caveat and there. So let's just kind of take what it said, but pull it forward a few years. They kind of foresaw major automation happening in sort of 3 waves. And the first one is what we can see now when you go into Tesco's and suddenly you're serving yourself and you don't need a person to check your stuff out for you. And I think it's probably that third wave that they were talking about, which I think they said sort of the mid 2030s is where more kind of white collar jobs might have to worry, because at that point it's got to be quite advanced robotics and AI to get you to that point. And I don't think we're there just yet. And I can't see us getting there in the next decade.
No, I'd agree with that. And this technology is advancing at such a pace, though, and then we're seeing exponential growth in the capacity. I looked a few months ago at some natural language processing tools which use artificial intelligence to basically take some source material and write it and make that writing indistinguishable from, I don't want to worry you about your job, Hannah, but make it indistinguishable from a human writing it. So this software was able to write a novel in less than a second. It's able to write articles for newspapers, and it's come on, leaps and bounds in a very short space of time because of this exponential growth in machine learning and artificial intelligence. So I do wonder, and Bill Gates used to say this at Microsoft back in the day, which is we always try and get this right. We always overestimate the speed of change in the short term, but underestimate it in the long term. So yeah, I think this could happen very quickly and to much greater extent than we maybe think it will. But of course, that will have consequences for jobs, for society. One thing it could lead to, and this Commission on Workers and Technology talks about how the rewards of this new technology won't be evenly shared, but they are going to have to start talking, I think, and having public debates about things like universal basic income. Because if it's technology doing the work and generating the wealth, who keeps that wealth? Is it the owner of the computer, or is it society as a whole, because this is a reward for society?
I think that's a really good point, and it's definitely one of those questions that we just don't know enough, I think, to be able to sensibly predict what might happen. I know that there are certain schools of thought that have argued, yes, automation sounds terrifying, and it sounds the idea that you've got almost like 50% of your workforce out. Basically, there was this very, very famous study from Oxford University that came out in, I think, 2012. And the headline figure that is often quoted from that is that 47% of US jobs could be automated. Now, you imagine the impact that would have on society, people not able to earn any money, and it would be absolutely dreadful. But what that actually wasn't looking at is how many jobs would be created as a result of automation, which could be the thing that levels everything back up. But I think it could go one of 2 ways. If we don't start to become a bit of a kinder society, I would argue, then we will end up incredibly divided. We need to figure out who gets that money. There'd be a need for some sort of universal basic income, because it's not fair to blame people for losing their jobs to automation because it's more efficient. There's also talk about things like a 4-day working week, and that kind of gives me ideals that, oh my God, we don't have to live to work anymore. We can work to live, and we can pursue our passions, and we can spend a lot more time doing things we love rather than things that we have to do because we feel like we have to be earning all this money all the time. I don't know which way it's going to go. In looking at things presently, I'm not that hopeful. But
no, you do wonder a bit that sort of the capitalists will take over and they'll keep the spoils of this technological advance. But I mean, you raise an interesting point there, which is if automation frees up time, and that was always the promise of technology, wasn't it? And it hasn't ever really materialized to date. So why would it in the future? But let's say it did. Let's say that a 4-day working week became the norm, or even a 3-day working week. I think the question then becomes for all of us: how do we spend that time? How do we pick and choose the activities that are really meaningful, that replace work, that give us a sense of purpose, a sense of identity? And that becomes the $1 million question at that point. If you've got your bases covered in terms of expenditure because you've got universal basic income, if you've got a computer doing your job for you, and that's sort of doing the heavy lifting of your job, so you just do the bits that add the human value, you don't sit at home hopefully watching daytime television all day, or playing Grand Theft Auto on the PlayStation. You do something meaningful, something productive, don't you? I'm not sure what that looks like for different people.
You would hope. People, you can't force people to do anything. If people do want to sit in watching Netflix all day, and because they're working 3 days a week and they can afford to support themselves by doing that, then I think that's fair enough. I know I would. I think sometimes about all the things I would do if I had time. I would definitely do things like a lot more running, because I would have more time to go out on longer runs, and I would use that to spend time doing that. I would probably write a blog. I'd probably do all sorts of things to do with photography. I like to think I would use the time very, very well. What would you do?
Similar stuff. I definitely want to write my next book, more photography. Can't do so much running anymore because my ankle, but certainly more swimming. And yeah, it's having that freedom to spend time on yourself and following your dreams and your passions, rather than feeling you have to be at your desk for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. I think what a world, if we can get to that stage. So there's positives to come from this, but as this commission says, potentially sectors that have faced furlough and redundancy could also now be seeing their jobs replaced by rising automation. So we have to think about the consequences for workers in that sector too.
Oh yeah. And it's like, even if all our dreams come true and we end up with this really lovely society where we've got free time to go and take pictures of pretty things in forests and things like that, that is never ever going to happen overnight. All this stuff takes such a long time to work out and to get the right legislation in place. And so I think, unfortunately, an awful lot of people might be very negatively affected before the white collar workers come in with their nice cameras and start enjoying themselves, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Hannah, thank you for joining us again on Talking Money for Informed Choice Radio. Lovely to see you, and we'll see you again after Christmas. We're going to take a little bit of a break now so we can both take some time off and relax a little bit and wrap presents and all that sort of stuff. But thank you for your time again.
Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.